Hi, are you ready for our Lego Bible story? I have my Legos all ready, and I have our Lego-sized Jesus all ready to go. Today's story comes from the Gospel of Mark. And in the story that we have this week, Jesus and his disciples went to Capernaum. And when the Sabbath came, the holy day, Jesus entered the synagogue, the place of worship, and he taught. And they were astounded at his teaching, for he taught as one having authority, and not as the scribes, who were also teachers. Just then, there was in the synagogue a man with an unclean spirit. And he cried out, "What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." But Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be silent, and come out of him." And the unclean spirit, convulsing him and crying with a loud voice, came out of him. And they were all amazed, and they kept on asking one another, "What is this? A new teaching with authority? He even commands the unclean spirits, and they obey him." At once, Jesus' fame began to spread throughout the surrounding region of Galilee. So Jesus regularly went to the synagogue. He went and he prayed and he taught. And so some of the other people who taught were the scribes, but Jesus taught with a different kind of authority. But somehow or another, when he was teaching, they really listened to him. There was something about the way that he taught that said that this was real. And while he was there was a man with an unclean spirit. Now, we don't actually know what that is. We have lots of different ideas. I wonder what you think an unclean spirit would be. But the unclean spirit, and a lot of times in the gospel, it's sometimes they're called unclean spirits, sometimes they're called other things, but they would be against God. And they often recognize Jesus and who he is even before anybody else does. It's my very bad synagogue. And Jesus was teaching. And they said, "I know who you are, the Holy One of God." So the unclean spirits recognized Jesus. Probably because Jesus was a threat to them, right? That they couldn't be where he was. An unclean spirit, whatever that is, can't exist with God. Those two things have to be apart. And so the unclean spirit recognized that and went flying out of the person. I don't know what an unclean spirit would be. So this is going to be the unclean spirit today. And the unclean spirit tried to get into an argument with Jesus, the man with the unclean. So it would have been the man speaking, but the spirit through him. And Jesus had no time for that. Jesus wasn't arguing, wasn't trying to meet in the middle or compromise or anything. He just said, "Be silent, get out." That's it. No conversation. And the man was convulsing, and the spirit went flying out of him. And everybody was amazed, because everybody would have seen that this man had this unclean spirit. There would have been something about him, and they wouldn't have had any way to get rid of it. And Jesus recognized it, and the unclean spirit recognized Jesus, and Jesus had commanded him and had power over that. I wonder what an unclean spirit would be today. There are some people who try to explain it away like it is a disease like epilepsy, but that doesn't seem to make any sense, because people who have epilepsy can be quite close to God. That doesn't fit. Some people try to talk like maybe it's some sort of mental illness, but that doesn't fit either. So an unclean spirit is something that would keep us away from God, and something that could even be in our holy places like the church. I wonder what that might be. There are isms that we talk about sometimes, like the way that we judge people, or we think less of them because of how old they are, or what gender they are, or what color they are. And I would think those are things that would keep us from God. So maybe those are unclean spirits, like racism and ageism and sexism. And those are sometimes in our holy places too, aren't they? I found that really interesting. I wonder if you did, that the man with the unclean spirit, the thing that would keep you from God, was right in the place where people went to be with God. I wonder if there are ever any things in church that keep us from being with God. I hope not, but I wonder. I wonder if we can be like Jesus and stay silent and leave, come out of him, that there is no place for the things that keep us away from God in the holy place. I wonder who they thought Jesus was. I wonder if they believed the unclean spirit who said, I know who you are the Holy One of God. There's not actually an unclean spirit in my house. It is my dog chewing on a bone. That's what the funny noise is in the background, just in case you were wondering. I wonder what Jesus would say if he came into our church today. Well, when we're able to get back together and people can be there. I wonder if we would recognize his teaching. I wonder if he would have to do something so that we would know it was him. But it was a really big deal what he did. And it's the very first thing he did publicly in Mark's gospel. So in each gospel, the first thing Jesus does as part of his ministry is a little bit different. Depends on who's telling the story and why. And in Mark's gospel, he's very big on letting us know that Jesus has authority, that he is somebody to be listened to, that he actually is of God, that he is God. And Jesus does something that regular people couldn't do. And he casts out this unclean spirit. And that's what he does as the very first thing. I wonder what you would have thought if you were there. I wonder, what's the most important part of this story? I wonder what you'll build with your Legos.